Good afternoon, my name is Camden and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be doing the book rec tag, which is a new tag video that I've been seeing cropping up a lot on YouTube lately, and I figured that I would hop on the trend. This tag was originally created by Steph. I will link her original video down below in the caption if you are interested in checking it out. The original tag consisted of 15 different questions for you to answer about some of your favorite books. I have added a few different questions, I've taken out some, so I've customized it a little bit, but I am excited to talk to you about my favorite books. Because of the nature of this video, I'm not going to be going into like a full review or detailed descriptions of what each book is about, but I have talked about a lot of these on my channel previously, so you may or may not have heard me mention them before, and I'll try and give you bare minimum details just so you can know what you'd be walking into if you decide to pick up any of these books. And all of that being said, I'm gonna hop right into the questions now. Question number one is a book that you tell people is your favorite. I feel like a lot of people probably struggle with this question because it can be really hard to decide what book is your favorite, but I have a set answer for this one. My favorite book of all time is Midwinter Blood by Marcus Sedgwick. This book is just absolute perfection for me. I've reread it several times since the very first time that I've read it, and every single time that I read it, I find more things to love about this book, and I find more details that I missed in previous reads. And this book just has my whole heart. Plot-wise and concept-wise, this book is really difficult for me to explain, but we're basically following our two main characters, Eric and Merle, and they meet each other at the beginning of this book, but immediately they both have a sense that they've met each other before, and they both feel very familiar to each other. Throughout this book, we are following their relationship in its different iterations, in its different incarnations across time. This book is about love, about different types of love, about reincarnation, about sacrifice, and it's not purely a romance book. This one definitely has like a darker culty side to it as well. So I absolutely love this book, and I feel like everyone needs to read it. It's super underrated and more people need to check this one out. Number two is a book that is your guilty pleasure. For this one, I ended up going with Verity by Colleen Hoover. I don't read a lot of books that I like feel guilty about, but this one is definitely one that I've been hesitant to admit that I've read before because a lot of people have very divisive opinions about Colleen Hoover. Some people really love her work, some people really hate her work. This book centers around a famous author named Verity Crawford, who's written an incredibly popular series that she is nearing the end of. But unfortunately, she gets into a really tragic accident that leaves her completely bedridden, unable to work, and unable to complete the final books in the series. So her publisher ends up reaching out to our main character, Lowen, and asks her to ghostwrite the final few books of the series. Lowen agrees to this opportunity, and as part of the deal, they're going to fly her out to Verity's house in order to take a look through her office and find any notes or outlines that the author may have completed that would give Lowen some clue as to the direction that the series is supposed to take from here on out. Things end up taking a really sinister turn though when Lowen ends up finding the author's own personal diary and starts to realize that things are not what they appear at all. Worse than that, through reading the diary, Lowen ends up starting to develop feelings for Verity's husband. This book is so incredibly good, and it really packs a big punch. I feel like a lot of thrillers I read start to go down like a really dark path, but always kind of pull up short of like how dark things are gonna go. This author really pulls no punches. This book really went there. It was dark, it was disturbing, it was terrifying. I love this one so much, and I definitely think you should read it, and if you have read it and you enjoyed it, don't feel guilty about it, okay? Number three is a book that you loved but were the minority. And for this one, I'm going to go with Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke by Eric LaRocca. This book honestly could have worked just as well for guilty pleasure, but I ended up putting it here because this book is probably one of the lowest rated books that I've ever read, but I ended up giving it 5 stars. This book is so controversial that it ended up on the books that deserve to go to jail list that creator is doing on TikTok. This book is told through emails and messages and online forums and texting, and it details this very, very toxic relationship between these two women who met online. These two women seemingly never meet each other in person, but through their interactions online, they end up deciding to enter into this like slave master type of relationship agreement. Things go so quickly off the rails, and I cannot overstate how disturbing this book is, how gross this book is, how horrific this book is. It is a horror novel, and it is very, very horrifying. I honestly cannot think of a single person that I would ever recommend this book to, but if you like really gross, disturbing horror novels and you are willing to go check the trigger warnings, because I don't want to send you into this one blind, maybe try it. That's a strong maybe. Number 4 is a book that you read the fastest, and for this one I'm going with The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornichek. This book is a Norse mythology retelling that follows the story of the witch Angrboda, who is the wife of Loki, as well as the mother of his 3 monstrous children. I read this book in a day or a day and a half, and I found it so impossible to put this one down. I was like, supposed to be watching a movie with my husband, but I was reading my book the whole time. I went to the laundromat, I was reading my book. Like, I just could not take my eyes off this one until I had finished it and known the ending. This book has very little in the way of plot. Angrboda as a character is very long-suffering. She deals with a lot of neglect in her marriage, and she also has such a pure maternal love for her children, and I just really enjoyed seeing her as a character and her kind of gain her power and her strength to stand up for herself and her children over time. And I just thought the whole story was just such a beautiful story of motherly love. Number 5 is a book that deserves more hype, and for this one I'm going with a really underrated YA fantasy novel that I read and absolutely loved, and that is Alatsoe by Darcy Littlebadger. This book is so cute. It's so fun. It's so well illustrated. It's based on stories from the Lipan Apache tribe. It deals with teens who are fighting against monsters. We have a main character in here who is super fun and sassy, and she can raise the ghosts of dead animals. It's really beautifully written. It's so worth your time. You should definitely go check it out because I absolutely love this one. Number 6 is a book that you have reread the most, and for me that would definitely be Book of 1,000 Days by Shannon Hale. I know this is absolutely crazy to say, but I think I've read this book almost 20 times by now. Most of those rereads were when I was much younger, between the ages of like 10 and 14, but this is still a favorite for me to this day, and I've reread it multiple times in the past few years. This book is like a journal style novel, and it's written by a lady's maid who has been locked into a tower with her lady because of her lady's disobedience to her father, and we're following them as they're surviving in this tower, and then as they escape the tower and kind of have some adventures afterward. I feel like this book is so well done. I love it so much. I love our main character, Dashti, and how humble she is and how strong she is and how she perseveres over everything, and she's just so sensible. I just love everything about this book. I don't know. I don't think I'm ever gonna get sick of reading it. Number 7 is a book from a genre that you don't typically read. For this one, I went with I Must Betray You by Ruta Sepetys. Thrillers and fantasy are my top 2 genres, and historical fiction really falls towards the bottom of the list of genres that I tend to read. But this historical fiction is super well done, and I enjoyed it so much. The reason I tend to gravitate away from historical fiction is because so much of the genre is dominated by like World War I, World War II, and Great Depression era historical fictions, and I don't tend to enjoy those books as much. But this one is following a really undercovered time in history, and that is the communist era in Romania. I feel like I learned so much through reading this book, and it really pulled at my heartstrings. I found myself like crying at certain points in this story, and that's really rare for me. So I really recommend this one, especially if you're like me, you like historical fiction, but you don't like to read about Europe during World War II all the time. Definitely give this one a try. I think Ruta Sepetys as an author always picks the most interesting little snippets of history to cover in her novels, and with such an abundance of empathy and research being present in her work. Number 8 is a book that deserves all of the hype that it gets, and for this one I'm going with If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. Honestly, as popular as this book is, I still feel like it deserves even more hype because it's just that good. This book was my first introduction to dark academia, and I absolutely love this one. We are following a group of 7 teenagers in this book who are all part of the theater program at an elite boarding school for the arts. This book is basically like a Shakespearean dark academia murder mystery. I love how the kind of archetypes that they've each been cast into during their time in this like theater group really affects the way that they start to perceive themselves and each other in real life. I found that part of this book to be so interesting. Overall, I was absolutely enamored with this book. It was such a page turner, and I really recommend this one widely to anyone. Number 9 is a book that you typically recommend. For this one, I'm going with Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I feel like since the start of my channel, this is the book that I've probably recommended the most often. This one is a Gothic horror novel set in Mexico, and we're following our main character Noemi as she is going to kind of try and rescue her cousin from what she thinks might be an abusive marriage. When Noemi arrives, a lot of her suspicions are confirmed. Her cousin seems to be under the influence of something. Her cousin's husband's family is extremely weird, and their behavior is very concerning. She feels almost trapped there. The house is giving off really weird vibes, and a lot of things just seem to be very wrong with the situation. And it doesn't hurt that Noemi is one of my favorite main characters of all time. She is super badass. She's super strong. She isn't afraid to call people out on their weird behavior. She's very sensible. I just loved her as a main character, honestly, and she made this whole book like 100 times better than it would have been otherwise. Number 10 is a book that has your favorite characters, and for this one, the obvious answer for me was Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This one is a cozy fantasy that kind of feels like if you had a dungeon master create a life simulator. Throughout this book, we're following an orc named Viv who has done the whole questing thing and has decided to kind of settle down and start a coffee shop. Throughout the book, she is attracting this whole other cast of characters and befriending them, having them work in her cafe, and I just really loved this whole group of friends. This book is super cozy. There's not a lot of plot happening. The main conflict in this book is between Viv and this guy who's trying to like collect taxes on her coffee shop and like kind of shut down her business. So everything is like very low stakes, and this story is just so lovely. It's such a beautiful story of like friendship and allowing people into your life, letting down your barriers, and kind of accepting help and care from others. Viv is such a tough, independent person, and it really takes a lot of effort for her to bring down those barriers and let her friends help take care of her and help support her and her dreams. And I just thought it was so beautiful. Like, what a beautiful message for a story. Number 11 is a book that you wish you could live in. I feel like Legends and Lattes would work perfectly well for this question as well. But for this one, I decided to go with A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. This book is set in a futuristic utopian type of society. Throughout this book, we're following a monk named Sibling Dex and a robot named Moscap as they are befriending each other and traveling around to kind of expose Moscap to more humans and allow him the opportunity to ask this burning question that he has, which is, what is it that humans need? This book is the perfect example of no plot, just vibes, but I feel like my mind could really rest easy if I knew that this was the kind of future that we had to look forward to as a society. So this is definitely the one that I would pick for where I'd want to live. Number 12 is a book that you thought you would hate, and for this one I decided to go with An Emotion of Great Delight by Tahira Mafi. This is not a book that I necessarily thought that I would hate, because I would never read a book that I thought I was going to hate, but I was super excited to read this one, and then my expectations came crashing down when I heard from a bunch of different people that the ending of this one was super unfulfilling and that it never really wrapped up, and that really ruined the entire reading experience for them. Couple that with a pretty low average rating, and I started to have some doubts that this one was going to work out for me, but I ended up really loving this book. It is super, super emotional. This book is following a Persian American and Muslim main character named Shadi in post 9/11 America, along with dealing with an increase in Islamophobia and the FBI targeting Muslim communities. Shadi's family has been dealing with just tragedy after tragedy in their family. This book was so sad and heartbreaking and really difficult for me to read at times, but it was really, really beautiful as well. Some books you just feel like you're being dropped into somebody's life and taken right back out of it, and there doesn't always have to be a lot of closure. So the ending being abrupt didn't really bother me in the slightest, and I honestly really love this book. Number 13 is a book that made you cry. For this one, I'm going with In 5 Years by Rebecca Searle. This one made me absolutely bawl my eyes out on New Year's Day a few years ago. It's really rare for me to actually physically cry during a book. I obviously read a lot of sad books and I feel pain and sadness while reading them, but having tears roll down my face is a very rare occurrence for me. I think what really got me about this book was that I was not expecting it to be sad when I went into it. So being hit in the face with that much pain and sadness, I just did not see it coming, and I was absolutely done for. The description of this book is very misleading because I went into this one thinking it was going to be like a romance novel. It was going to make me feel all of the warm and fuzzy feelings, and then it ended up punching me in the face. Number 14 is a book that you wish you could read for the first time again, and for this one I'm going with the book that had the best plot twist I've ever read in a thriller novel ever, and that is Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. I really wish I could read this one for the first time again and experience the chain of mind-blowing plot twists that this one has to offer. This was actually one of the first thrillers that I ever read, so it really got me into the thriller genre squarely, and I have never looked back. And question number 15 is a book that someone new to your favorite genre should try. For this one, I'm going with fantasy, particularly YA fantasy, and the book that I chose for this one is The Midnight Bargain by C.L. Polk. This book is really good and it's really underrated. I feel like it almost gives off Bridgerton vibes a little bit. You kind of have the same dynamics of having it be like your season to arrange a marriage, and there's balls in this one, there's magic. We're following a character who is learning to practice magic, even though it's highly discouraged for women to kind of access this magic. Overall, I think this one is a really fun and beginner-friendly fantasy novel, so if you've been looking to get into the fantasy genre and you haven't yet, definitely give this one a read. I think you'd enjoy it. And that is going to be all for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching this one. I hope you enjoyed. If you have the time, please go click the like button, click the subscribe button, comment down below. Let me know some of your answers to these questions, and I will look forward to seeing you all in a new video next week. Goodbye.